Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. So when people are using all of these sonic aspects of their podcast, when they're using the podcast itself, how can they leverage that for their brand in general? Because a lot of these people are creating podcasts in order to promote their brand. Is that correct?
Of course. Well, and there's different ways to leverage a podcast too. So there's thought leadership and visibility podcasts, and those might be ones that you associate more with the larger, more marquee brands like the Trader Joe's and the Charles Schwab's. Like those are more, they're not necessarily what I would call conversion focused, call to action driven, they're more to sustain and maintain the brand that they've already built. The businesses that we work with and we get in the trenches with are the business owners who are really looking at taking their podcast and using it for visibility, thought leadership, and subject matter expertise like we talked about, but also for lead generation and then to convert into sales. So the types of podcasts that we're building for these particular businesses are strategically developed. The formats are built to accommodate that strategy without it coming across as an infomercial, because it's incredibly important that it's entertaining and engaging so that people will share the content. They'll take it to their next, we always want to say, we want to leave them with a moment or a nugget that when they get finished listening to that content or watching that piece of content and they get on their next Zoom call, it used to be the next water cooler moment, but when they get on their next Zoom call, that they feel lighter or smarter and have something that they want to share with somebody that makes them come across as smarter. And if you can think about what's in it for the audience, then all of the visibility, leads, and sales component happens as a residual of that. And so that's really like the main goal and the main objective from the content creation aspect. But then once that content's created, then there's a whole nother conversation about how it can be repurposed and used for the lead generation and used in very specific calls to action to close business and things like that. But the most important key is what I was just saying, is that it's got to look good, sound good, look good if it is video, but it's got to sound good, good quality audio, good editing, and it's got to have enough interesting information that people want to talk about what they heard, or they have a pivotal moment or an aha, or it changes their life. So, and that again is why I am so incredibly passionate about podcasting and just in general, because I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but listening to a podcast literally did change my life with a medical condition that I had. So it was interesting prior to that, because I started Produce Your Podcast in 2016, and we had, we were like, one voice can change the world, and you continue the conversation or change the conversation in your industry. I think change the conversation in your industry was one of our first taglines. But I suffer from migraines and really bad cluster migraines. And we had relocated to Taos, New Mexico, and they had accelerated and they had gotten worse. So I had owned Produce Your Podcast at this point by I was 4 years in, and I couldn't do anything. The migraines had accelerated and escalated. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't look at a screen. I couldn't read. I couldn't so what did I do? I was like, I'm going to listen to a podcast about migraines. and I did. And this is the reason I share this, is because it was a business branded podcast for a person who wanted to sell a program for migraine sufferers. So these are the types of podcasts that we produce, right? So I'm listening to it, and they talk about trigger foods, and I learned for myself that I have an allergy to a vegetable dye called annatto, and that is it makes me incredibly physically sick. But until I didn't even know about that. I didn't even know it existed until I listened to this podcast. And then I eliminated it, and then I added it back, and then it was a disaster. And I was like, okay, this is legit for real. And that's been since 2020. 4 years later, the amount of migraines I have are like complete, almost eliminated by
I'm
just
so
that
glad
one.
to hear that.
Well, me too. But
Yeah.
I really, really share that story because that it's not just me going, you can change the world one voice at a time. Like that person's voice changed my literal life and my family's life and my friend, because it was debilitating for me. So
Yeah.
that's the power.
Quite something. Totally. Yeah. I'm really glad that you found out a way to get rid of that problem because, wow, yeah, you're right. That's a lot.
Yeah, and it's 100% factual with zero embellishment. Like it was a game changer for me. And
Well,
I
I'm so
just
glad.
can't even, I mean, because boy, did I love some orange cheese. It's what makes, for people who are like, well, what is an auto? What does it do? Because now I feel like we're in this rabbit hole. I'll get us out of it. But it's a vegetable dye that makes cheese orange. So if you eat white cheese, you're good. But anything that they put in, so the emergencies, like if you drink an emergency, like one of those vitamin C drinks or but mainly they use it to dye cheese orange. But it was when I reintroduced emergency by accident on the way to podcast movement in Nashville.
Oh no.
And it took me out for 2 days. I missed 2 days of podcast movement in Nashville because I drank 2 of those vitamin C drinks because of a layover. And then I was just like out for the count. And then I looked at the ingredient label, of course, afterwards. And I was like, oh, there's an auto in here. So I was like, okay, this is real.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, that's a good way to learn. And it's working. And people have found all sorts of interesting information from podcasts.
Right. Probably not what you thought we were going to talk about today. Me neither.
No, I am all about the power of podcasting. The human voice is an amazing thing. And when we put it to good use, wow, like just wow.
100%.
So yeah.
Yes.
So I'm all in on this. Like I love it. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That is.
Yeah. So can we go back to I hate to do this because I know that I'm like picking at a, but
I love it. No,
I
want to talk about it. I'm just the one that keeps getting us off the rails.
No, it's totally fine. I just want to go back to the video aspect because I know that a lot of people are saying right now that to have a podcast, it has to have a video. And I want to ask you about this because I know, deep breaths. So I had to do this recently myself. So we are recording this now on Riverside so that we have the video as well as the audio, and the audio will be pristine. And it will involve explaining anything that happened on the video that they wouldn't be able to see. So we're all good.
Yeah. We've already done a good job of that anyway. So we're good.
Well, yeah. But what I end up using the video for is for a completely separate thing. So I know a lot of people who do podcasts also do the same thing. They have their video on YouTube. And the YouTube audience is pretty much completely separate from the audience that goes to listen to it on, say, Apple Podcasts. Mm-hmm. So how do you feel people should be using video if they have it? And do you think it's necessary?
Okay, I love this question. Thank you for asking me. I'm going to try not to step up on a huge soapbox and scream and yell. So, so I'm going to answer.
It's okay. I've given you the soapbox. Here you go.
I'm going to answer the question first. So, if you are currently thinking about being an audio only podcaster, or you are thinking about starting an audio podcast, absolutely yes. Yes. You do need to start the audio podcast or keep the audio podcast. How I answer this question today is, however, it's going to be beneficial to your audience growth strategy to layer in a video component. So you can very much optimize the audio platform for your personal brand, for your business growth, for a passion project, for any reason that you want to get your voice out there to be on a podcast. You absolutely can make a very successful podcast in audio only. But to now, based on the trends and where people are consuming and discovering content, and I'm going to just say it, and because we've gotten a little bullied by Google, who owns YouTube. I mean, they shut down Google Podcasts, and then it's almost like they did a secret PR campaign. Maybe it wasn't even a secret PR campaign. Maybe it was just but they infiltrated the podcasting industry with video has to be, video podcasts, video, and people grab onto headlines without necessarily going deep into strategy. And so video is necessary to grow your audience. You need to have a presence on YouTube, and because of the way they serve up the algorithms, they're going to be more kind to you if you are having a video component to your podcast. For a while, we were okay with being able to put the cover art or some static graphics and still be able to benefit from the SEO component of YouTube by doing that. In the last 6 months to a year, that has really changed dramatically. So when you're recording an audio and video like you're doing right now, your strategy is the exact sexy, specific, and smart strategy that audio-focused podcasters should be doing. They should use a platform like Riverside or Descript that was formerly Squadcast, or they should use a broadcast quality capture program, StreamYard. And then they should edit the audio separately because it is its own, it deserves its own editing. And then using the video, if you're not prepared to release or don't want to invest in the editing of the video, and please don't do it on Descript because you're going to get a jumpy, choppy video. It's going to clip. It's not going to be representative of your brand. It's going to mess your audio quality up. But
very true.
But use the video for shorts, use it for shorter segments, use it for social media clips, use it for that, because if you're not doing that, that's what's going to leave you behind. And also, I want to say that video is effective. I have this thing where I think I even shared it with you when we were having a conversation outside of this interview, was I am like a 3-year-old throwing a temper tantrum right now because I started Produce Your Podcast. I didn't start Produce Your Video Podcast. I started Produce Your Podcast. And based on the story I've shared through this whole episode, it's because of what I love and what I believe in for all kinds of different reasons. So I have been struggling as a business owner, trying to figure out how do I embrace this myself and keep my missions and values and my core teams and my leadership and keep all of that intact, because I refuse to become a video production only company. That's just not, if I wanted to start a video production company, I would have started a video production company. So I have been and I have turned the corner, and now I'm really super excited about now helping people redefine how audio can work for them outside of just the podcast. And that strategy, and I haven't even shared this on any other podcast, so breaking news.
Well, thank you.
Is that, utilizing your audio podcast to then go in and do ad spend into other audio podcasts that feeds the ecosystem of all of us. But it also gives you an opportunity for you to have opportunities and visibility pieces for your podcast to grow your show, but also to leverage your sponsorships and monetize your show, market your own products and services. It really opens up this whole other opportunity for you that really, again, reiterates the power, because if you use a mirrored audience, then you're reaching the people who are already listening to the type of content that you're creating, and you're capturing them in the format of their choice. So it's a natural transition for them to be like, oh, well, I love this health and nutrition podcast. Of course, I'm going to love the Salad with a Side of Fries podcast because, hey, that's just a cool name, and I want to go check it out, and it's a podcast. So I'm already spending time listening to podcasts about health and nutrition. I'm going to listen to this podcast too. And that's, again, another way to leverage the power of audio.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you and I should definitely talk.
Well, like I said, you heard it here first. This is an area
I heard it here first.
This is an area that we're really strategically bringing into our business model. We have tested it, we've piloted it, we know it works, and we've got a really fascinating strategy around it and formula around it, and that is what. But I share it on this podcast specifically, and I'm really excited that it got shared here first because it was the turning point for me to fall back in love with my business again. Because I have really been struggling with all the chaos in our business was focused on video challenges. All of the stress, all of the stressors on my team, the stressors on everything was connected back to video because we were an audio only company that started supplementing with video, and then we had the request to do video and the request to supplement it with audio, which we don't necessarily honor because of all the things we've talked about. But it was just everything that we were doing around video was causing angst and stress, and financially, like it's so much more expensive to edit video to the degree that it needs to be done for business branding, and more expensive for the engineers. And I just was like so frustrated. Like, is this the end for me? And like, no. Radio came before television. Audio podcast came before the term video podcast. Like, we'll get through this. But I had to figure out a way to do it as a leader in the industry and in my company to be able to feel good about myself about it again.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you found that joy in it again. That's fantastic. So I want to ask you about the Podcast Professionals Association before we're kind of getting to the end here. So before we get to the actual end, I want to ask you about the association. If you could talk a little about that and who you want to be a part of that would be great.
Yes. So the Podcast Professionals Association is the industry's only nonprofit. It's a 501c6. It's the trade organization that's focused on serving podcast service professionals. So this is the organization for producers, editors, freelancers, writers, podcast managers, voiceover, like any person who is out there making a living serving the podcasters. So what I feel so strongly about is that if we are building if we have an opportunity, a safe container for people to come and talk about the challenges that I just shared on this podcast, is like, I wasn't talking about these struggles publicly because honestly, it took me a while to even figure out why I was mad. But we have 2 virtual events a month where people can connect and have conversations about how they price their business, challenges in the industry. How are you facing AI? What happens if you lose a big client? How are you changing your prices? Like, these are the conversations that being a business development strategist and working with thousands of entrepreneurs, primarily women entrepreneurs over the last few decades, like, I know as a solo operator, as a small business owner and a scaled business owner, like, what if you want to build your business to scale it? What if you want to sell it? Like, we need to be having these conversations with each other so that we thrive and we survive. Because, and this is where the mission and values piece of it comes in, because the better podcast service professionals we are, the better podcasts we will create. And then those podcasts will be able to make impact and increase their revenues or their messaging, depending on what their objective is, maybe get sponsorship, monetization, so that keeps them sustainable. And it just feeds the entire ecosystem of the industry. But if our podcast service professionals are struggling to make a living, like, we need collaboration, we need support, we need community, we need advice. We need a safe container. So I wanted to do it myself, and no, that's a lie. I wanted to do it. I did not want to do it by myself. So I actually got the domains and started the process in 2019, but I kept holding back. I was like, I don't want to be the face of this, and I really don't want to do this alone. This is so much bigger than me.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Especially making it a nonprofit, but that was so important to the co-founder. Jen Trepic is our is my co-founder. We have a founder circle that helped. It was 2 years in process. Once Jen and I decided to do this together, I was like, I felt so much more solid about having a co-founder. Then we built a founder circle. We worked for a year with the founder circle to really determine and be very decisive about the focus for the podcast service professionals. And then we launched it for membership in March. And then we had the official press release launched to US and Canada on International Podcast Day, September 30th this year. So thank you for asking about it, because it is just, to me, it's an extension of every single thing we talked about today. That's the why.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, first of all, because that's big news. And I hope that if someone listening here is in the podcast profession and wants to have support, that they will join your organization, because it sounds like the perfect place for them to be. Definitely. But yeah, I also wanted to ask you, I'd like to get a little philosophical towards the end here. And so I want to ask you why you think sound is important in general, because that's kind of the why of this podcast, to let people know why sound is important. And, you know, the fact that we should pay more attention to it, maybe in every daily thing we do, you know.
I feel like the whole episode I could have taken up the time saying this, but now I know I have to be succinct. So our voice is the place where we are heard. So if you are stuffing anger, if you're stuffing grief, like it's the stopping place, but it's also the place where it opens up for freedom. It's the place for, if you are feeling sad, or you are feeling mad, or you are feeling love or feeling joy or happy, that's also where it comes out. And there's just absolutely nothing that can, I mean, when you're fearful and your voice like shakes, like that's so authentic. And so it's just to me, it is the absolute extension of human emotion, no matter what that emotion is. And for people who have struggled getting their voice out, whether through a disability or through a trauma or just through fear or shame, anywhere, like if they can experience that opportunity to, in any way or shape or form, to get their voice out, it changes the whole demeanor of who you are in your body. And then the power of sound, to me, is the equivalent to walking in a house that or walking and smelling the popcorn movie theater, popcorn smell in the movie theater, or the chocolate chip cookie in the real estate house when they bake the cookies. It's like that, to me, sound has the same, if not more power than that, because it can take you back to a moment. And like us sharing about K92 and the radio station and calling in and you being 10 years old, like you could, if I ever hear Meatloaf 2 out of 3 ain't bad, my memory is me like, hey, can you play 2 out of 3 ain't bad? Like that's a memory that just like, it immerses me in that moment. And I literally have full body chills.
It's time travel.
It is. And in such a beautiful, like, personal way, but then collective way too. So because it can move people in collective ways through storytelling. And then think about true crime and how many crimes have been solved because true crime became it's what put podcasting back on the map, and so much of the sound, and that's what kept people involved in those shows, right? And I mean, my God, War of the Worlds was like the first iteration of that. Think of the power of sound in that. I mean, there's no
that scared a lot of people,
and there's just no disputing. They're just like, I would go to the mat. Like what are those social media memes? Like, fight me on this. Like I would fight on this, and I do every day, I think, in a good positive way, like in what really lights me up. So
it's worth fighting for, I think. Definitely.
It is. It is absolutely worth fighting for. It is, and even so, more so a fight. I want to really almost put like philosophical positive spin on it. It's worth exploring. Like people like you and me, like we're cut from the same cloth. Like we know it, we love it. It's in our blood. But if it's not, like, you're really missing out. Like, give it a chance. Like, explore it. Have the experience. Like, just don't read the headlines and take it literally. Like, just find your own pathway with audio and sound and sonic branding and all of the things, because it's so fun. it opens up the theater of the mind in a way that no video can really do.
And there's so much to explore. It's not like you're going to find the end.
Ever. That's the
Ever.
beautiful part. I mean, I've been talking about 50 years-ish of different iterations of how audio has impacted my life today. And we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah. This podcast has been going now. This will be 5 years. Well, I'm starting the 5th year.
Congratulations.
So, yeah. But I mean, I never run out of topics.
Yeah, especially when people bring weirdo random stories to your podcast like I did today.
I love them. I'm here for those. That's exactly why I have this podcast. It's perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime. More of those where these came from.
Exactly. Well, okay. So if people want to reach out and get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Well, the very best way is produceyourpodcast.com. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to, I encourage you to pull up some of those podcasts that we talked about. The Fans First podcast, you can find it and listen to the Get Off Your Lawn and take some of the fun stuff that we talked about and actually check up the shows out. But really, produceyourpodcast.com is such an amazing resource for you if you want to. We have a lot of blogs. You can connect with me to book a call. You can sample some of our shows. You can hear how sponsorships are integrated into our podcast strategy for our clients if that's something that you're thinking about doing. If you're just curious about the things that you and I talked about today, that is absolutely produceyourpodcast.com. That's the place. Not Produce Your Video Podcast.
Yeah. Produce Your Podcast.
Produceyourpodcast.com. I'm just having fun, but yeah.
That's okay. I love it. Yes. Thank you so much, Traci. This has been a blast. I really appreciate it. And I love what you are doing for podcasting, for audio. Please keep doing it. Love it.
Thank you. And thank you also for having me on and having this opportunity to really talk about something that is so near and dear to me for so many reasons.
My absolute pleasure.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.